You know, I don't want anybody else to have to go through what I went through.
St. Charles, they try to bury me in solitary confinement, but they forgot that I was a seed that I would grow.
Here in the St. Louis region, we are 3.5 years removed from the killing of Mike Brown. There have been many so-called reforms on the local and state level, some on the national level, but the underlying forces of structural racism, of classism, of criminalization of poverty, those all remain. And the people who are overrepresented in our criminal legal system are as much poor and people of color today as they were 3.5 years ago. And that fundamental problem is something that we haven't really grappled with just yet.
After St. Charles? Oh yeah, I was upset. I was frustrated, disappointed, and upset because at the time I didn't even know whether or not a lawyer was going to take on my case or assist me with this, or even if it was going to be some justice behind what had happened.
Eric Smith says he turned himself into St. Charles County for an outstanding traffic violation in 2017. That's when a judge sentenced him to 12 days in jail plus a $75 fine. After just 6 days inside, Smith says he was playing a card game when another inmate started to threaten and confront him. After guards intervened, Smith says one of them slammed his head into a metal stool, leaving him with a near-fatal head injury that he still suffers from today. HuffPost obtained footage of the incident as part of our investigation. Eric says that what happened to him is just part of a larger problem with civil rights abuses at the jail.
When officers or staff violates your civil rights or your rights, when are they held accountable or have consequences? If you speed, you get a ticket or you have jail time. But if they do something wrong, then it's just, we're staff, or we're a correctional officer, or we're an officer, so the law is with me, so I just do what I want type thing. When are they held responsible or accountable for what they do?
Aliaddin Ali Kwanda was arrested in St. Charles on March 24, 2014, on multiple charges of theft. He stayed in St. Charles County Jail for almost a year after he couldn't afford to pay bail. Once inside, Kwanda says guards at St. Charles County Jail threatened him with anti-Muslim insults and placed him in solitary confinement. During his 8 months in solitary, Kwanda says guards allowed another inmate to enter his cell and attack him in his sleep. HuffPost reached out to St. Charles to obtain footage of Kwanda's incident. On May 15th, the county's director of communications, Mary Enger, emailed HuffPost, quote, "The altercation occurred in an in-housing unit of the jail. For privacy reasons, we do not have video cameras in those areas."
When I was attacked in St. Charles, I was sleeping. So a lot of times I have, I wouldn't say nightmares, but it's like a nerve that triggers and I jump up thinking somebody's in the hallway or somebody's in front of me.
Kwanda's lawyers say he, quote, "was never told formally why he was detained in solitary confinement, nor was he allowed to appeal the decision." The jail says it doesn't utilize the practice. However, they do have segregation policies. Inmates are detained in the segregation unit for punishment, or if they're deemed high risk, mentally deficient, or in need of alternative placement for their protection. Jail policy has no maximum for how long this confinement can last, but human rights groups like the United Nations say any period longer than 15 days should be banned.
People don't understand, what's it like to be incarcerated? I want you to really picture, like I've told everybody else, to be incarcerated 23 hours a day in a room by yourself with no window, no book, no religious Bible. 23 hours a day, you eat, sleep, that's it. You come out for 1 hour a day, if you're lucky. Some days you don't because they're short-staffed. Do a whole year for that. That's like locking yourself in your bathroom for a year and having somebody feed you in that room. Your mind just runs out of things to do.
What happened to me, how many more people is it going to happen to before they do something?
Despite the injuries Smith says he suffered as a result of the attack, and despite his complaints of intense pain, nausea, vomiting, and fainting, Smith's lawyers say he was refused proper medical care. 2 months later, Smith had an MRI where doctors discovered bleeding in his brain, a nearly fatal condition known as chronic subdural hematoma. St. Charles County Jail says video of Smith's incident exonerates its employees and that guards followed jail protocol.
I mean, I get agitated now more than ever. I didn't have a short temper or short fuse.
Smith was released in January 2017 and Kwanda in February 2015, but neither can escape the hold St. Charles County Jail still has on them. Smith says he struggles to support his family and deal with the lasting effects of his brain injury. Kwanda says he suffers from paranoia, anxiety, and night terrors, and he lives in fear of crowded spaces. Together, they filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the jail.
To win this case would definitely put a hole in their pocket, not just financially. I think they'd realize like the publicity is like, wow, we're finally being exposed for what we are.
On May 3rd, the county's director of communications, Mary Enger, emailed HuffPost. Quote, "We have reviewed the incidents involving Eric Smith and Aliadin Kwanda, and, after an internal investigation, find all protocol was followed correctly in both cases. We are confident there was no wrongdoing on the part of any county employee, and look forward to vigorously defending these erroneous and scurrilous allegations in a court of law." Smith and Kwanda's lawyers plan to try the case this year.
There's been a huge population influx into St. Charles in the past, I would say 2 or 3 decades, really as the latest iteration of the St. Louis region's white flight. In that context, I think the St. Charles County criminal legal system and the St. Charles County Jail is sort of an interesting piece. There's a real overrepresentation of people of color in that system. What we've heard from people like Eric and Ali is that there's a real mistreatment of folks who are in that facility that, you know, not only is immoral and should be unacceptable to all of us, but is unconstitutional and unlawful.
St. Charles County is nearly 90% white, but white inmates make up only 16% of the jail population. 84% are people of color.
We've sued, I think, over 20 municipalities in the region for what we call debtor's prison claims. That is, people who are held in jail just because they don't have the money to get out. And we've had a number of state class actions for illegal fees that were charged by municipal courts. And then we've had a number of other lawsuits that touch on various police practices and police misconduct practices, including unlawful arrests, retaliation against protesters, invalid arrests without probable cause. All of those are part of this system, and in the case of Eric and Ali, what we have are people who are in custody, who are in a correctional facility, who are then subjected to constitutional abuses, even in the context of confinement.
I just think that everything needs to be reviewed.
I just stay positive, look at it like, I'm gonna overcome this, or it's gonna be a good result out of this. Any little progress is good.
If I win this case, it would mean justice.